Good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? It is Thursday morning. We actually had an open mic here in the cafe last night, which went pretty well. I mean, you had a few kind of cringier uh, performances than others, but it was a fun time. It was good to bring some extra revenue in. Um, Still just trying to make our ends meet, obviously. Today we're going to have a quick episode. We're just going to recap some fun stuff I've listened to these last few days. I'm going to start with the record that's playing right now, and obviously got to keep it quiet, keep the disabling sensors from botting my ass. But a record I wanted for a long time. I used to see it actually quite a lot in the wild, and of course the demand all of a sudden increased for it, and it's become a pretty tough record to find. And I mean, it's out there, but the copies are expensive. And for a record I used to see for $5, it's now rarely that you see under 40, 50, 60 bucks. It's probably the centerpiece and showpiece of the great Concord label. But Ray Brown, Solar Energy, it's a fantastic record that I'm well familiar with through streaming. A lot of my streaming Pandora jazz stations kind of revolve around Gene Harris, the Three Sounds, often Red Garland. I love that kind of stuff. And in a lot of the stations I had, this record would pop up songs from it and almost non-stop. A-Train, Cry Me a River. It's really fantastic. And of course, my good friend Jean-Michel Rieser from Switzerland, from Lausanne, Beethoven as they call him, he turned me on to this record a long time ago. He and Ray Brown were dear friends. And I have a lot of the other Concord stuff that he was really into. And I just realized that Gene Harris signed the back of this. I don't know if you can read that, but that says, to Nancy, my very best, Gene Harris. So that's pretty cool. I'm a huge Gene Harris guy. If I recall, he's a Detroit guy. Leader of the Three Sounds, of course, of Blue Note fame. Gene is a pulsing R&B, gospel blues influenced jazz player who has a lot of pocket, a lot of feel, a lot of tenacity and attack, but it's always within pocket, within groove, and has feeling that's just, it's irrevocable. You can just feel Gene Harris's tambourine and potato salad, the Black Church. It's right there, and Gene Harris is playing. Most of the Three Sound stuff embodies that. And he goes to Concord here in the 70s and the 80s with Ray Brown and a cohort of other great trad players. And everything you can find with Gene Harris and Ray Brown together that I have so far in my collection that I have heard, it's been some of the best traditional jazz of the 70s and 80s. For me, a lot of jazz in that era really kind of goes off the rails. Your Kenny G, I mean, a lot of stuff is very easy listening. All the ECM stuff is very new agey and ego-driven, compositional, complex, modern, alternative prog rock. It's jazz so loses its way. The feel and the pocket and the Black Church and just the black roots of the music becomes less and less discernible. And it becomes more and more engrossed in composition, more and more enraptured by the intellect of degrees and education and knowledge, which is a fine thing, but it does create a need for the artist to become more signature. This has to be my creation because I'm intellectual. And as intellects, we are all guilty of wanting to make our mark and leave our mark, but it can often strip away feeling and meaning when we start thinking about something too much. The old analogy I often give of there's two roads, two paths to a place. And the one path is the road you've taken 1,000 times that you can think of in your sleep and not even have to question the turn. You can drive it almost with two eyes closed. You know this turn, this hill, that curve, and there's no need to think about where you're going, where you're heading, where you're turning next, what landmarks to be looking for. And so your mind's free to wander. Your mind's free to roam, to imagine, to dream, to think of foreign landscapes. I don't need to worry about where I'm going because I know these chord changes. So I'm as free as a musician can be in something that I know well. The limitations of composition and rigid composition, and especially a lot of the free avant-garde stuff, it really strips away freedom. suddenly it becomes more about 4 or 5 guys trying to remember, when is that key change? When is that tempo change? When are we going to go that direction? I got to listen for that one little break. I mean, it becomes very much more a cerebral enterprise, which changes the experience as a listener. What's fueling that art? And so, back to this record, it's an outstanding piece. Not as cheap as it should be. Sonically, it sounds incredible. Like, few records are going to sound better on your turntable than this record. I think it just sounds amazing. The bass in particular sounds round and full. Ray Brown's tone is really unequivocal. It's just wonderful, full, round-bodied, melodic, centered, just tonality that's to die for. And then you have Gene just really plucking away, doing this thing. Red Holloway's on the tenor. Emily Remler's on the guitar, who's actually, the guitar is quite fantastic on this record. I did not realize it was a female. Garrick King on the drums. And Holloway and Remler are special guests. I don't think they're on every song, if I recall. But I listened to this record like 4 times the other day, and it's pretty cool that Gene Harris, his little signature on there. Big fan. Ray, Gene, finally have the record. And it's the kind of record I could play in the cafe all day, honestly. Just flip from side to side. It's such a fantastic piece. So yeah, it's a fantastic record that I can't recommend highly enough. And I finally got it here on my show. Been a long time coming. And like I said, I've been on it a few times, and it's always gotten so high. And like, I've seen copies go for $80-100, which is, for a Concorde, that's high. I mean, just the era of that. It's 80s, so it's not as old. 70s, 80s. And I think they pressed quite a few copies of those Concorde records. There seem to be quite a few out there. But that one just has become unattainable. Here's an old Storyville piece, of course, George Weins label out of Boston. They had some great stuff going on in Storyville. And this is the great Joe Newman, one of the great trumpet players. Him and Joe Wilder are two of my favorite, and Charlie Shavers, 3 of my favorite trumpet players really from that era. They're kind of very unheralded today, but deserve far more recognition. Newman's a bright tone, a bright player with some energy and some force, but he also plays a lot of blues. He's got a pretty, like I said, sharp sound. He played with Basie for some time. I love Joe Newman's body of work. He makes quite a few records at Roulette. I mean, I have a pretty good chunk of his early body of recordings. John Lewis, of course, of Modern Jazz Quartet fame is on this. The great Gene Quill, Frank Foster, a Basie alumni. Billy Byers on the trombone, Freddie Green. So you got some more Basie with Milt Hinton and O.C. Johnson. So it's a pretty incredible lineup there. Just jazz royalty in every step of the way. Cool cover. Some of this might have been... He has a 10-inch on Storyville as well. But I think this might be actually all the material, if I remember. I think I would have marked it on there if it was the 10-inch stuff repackaged. And it looks like there's 10 songs. No, 9. But they could have added a song or two, but I don't think it is 10-inch material. Again, I'm not positive on that. I'll have to look. The great Hampton Hawes, one of the great players of the West Coast scene. Fantastic modern player. He's got some Monk influence, but he's really more of a pocket player than Monk. I love Hampton Hawes' work. He shows up in some surprising places as a sideman at times, but his own stuff as a leader tends to be fairly accessible and modern. Crisp playing, nice chords, a great melodic sense. There's a good element of rhythm and blues in his playing as well. This is with Red Mitchell on bass and Chuck Thompson on drums. A fantastic piece on the great West Coast Contemporary label out of Los Angeles. 3515, making it the 15th release in the 3500 sequence for this label. He was a stalwart of contemporary records in the mid to late 50s. He has some 10-inch stuff, but he does quite a few 12-inch LPs for contemporary, including those three great LP set. Fantastic stuff. A guy people shouldn't pass over. That's one of those other 3 I was talking about. Hampton Hawes Quartet All Night Session, that's number 3. There's 2 more volumes of that, obviously. A record I haven't listened to yet since I pulled it, I'm going to play it today, is the great John Jenkins record with Kenny Burrell. If memory serves, Jenkins was a Chicago native, and there was a wave of Chicago guys coming into New York. A lot of them were recording for Blue Note. Fantastic, aggressive, but like I said, black church blues based, large black Chicago neighborhoods. These guys are coming up with their own kind of sound and tonality and feel, real Midwestern gospel blues. Kenny Burrell features on the guitar, and Burrell is just fantastic on this. It's a pretty short, brief LP for a 12-inch. It blows by way too quickly. It feels like it's really short, but I mean, those all look like they're probably 5-minute songs, but it just seems like those 3 songs on each side go by way too quick. A fantastic piece that originals go for big bucks. Big bucks. And that's a classic records reissue from probably the early thousands. Fantastic piece here by great Frank West. And Frank West is a fantastic flautist, also a fantastic tenor player. I think he might dabble in the baritone at times, if I recall. But again, a Basie alum. He's a guy that was a big part of Basie's groups for a long time. And Frank West makes some great work as a solo player at Prestige and other labels as well. He works a lot with Frank Foster, the two Franks, again, Basie alum. Frank West, a great multi-instrumentalist, a bit of a precursor to guys that come later, even like guys like Eric Dolphy. Not as out as Dolphy got to be, but the great Thad Jones is on this, another great Basie alum, part of the great Detroit Jones brother family. A young Roy Haynes is on this, along with Buddy Catlett on the bass, and Gilda Mahone is on the piano. I listened to this 3 times a day, both sides. It's just fantastic. It's light, it's airy, but it's still got the Black Church in it and groove. You know what I mean? It's not fluffy, it's just light. A fantastic record that's truly one of my favorite records ever. This next one right here. And I don't say that lightly. It's not something I say on every episode. I rarely throw that terminology out. Greatest ever, my favorite ever. It's such an objective, hard to quantify thing. It's not something that I want to stake my reputation on very often. Because it's easy to look at something and go, oh, I love this, which I'll say. But to say it's one of my favorite, I mean, I see too many people saying every day, this is my favorite record, and then the next day, this is my favorite record. It's like you lose validity at some point. You lose validation, qualification for that opinion if everything's just great and amazing. And again, it takes a lot of records, I think, before someone can start really being critical about the records they own. For the most part, most record collectors, myself included, first 500, 1,000, 2,000, whatever it is, the number, we bought it, we love it. I spent $14, I spent $400. I love this, I bought it. And that's kind of a lot of us, it comes down to, I bought it, I know what it is, I know about it, so therefore I'm informed about it, so therefore I feel like I love it. It's a simple but kind of silly juxtaposition. And it takes a while for you to own the record that you've had for a long time. You listen to it and go, you know, I don't really think that's my favorite thing. I mean, and things have moods to them, but you also can get to a certain point where you're like, you know what, that's not the style of the genre that I'm really into. I think the sooner you can figure that out, the sooner you can buy a record you're going to listen to for the rest of your life. But this is by the great Marlene Van Plank, a fairly overlooked and forgotten singer who's got great styling, a lot of black in her, even though she's a white gal. Sounds like she's Dutch, possibly German. Marlene Verplank, and this is on the great Savoy label, number 12,058. And that 12,058 number indicates this probably was recorded in 1956, maybe 57. Again, the lineup on here is stellar. You have the great Hank Jones, again of the Jones family from Detroit. The great Wendell Marshall on the bass, along with the great Kenny Clark on the drums. And if any of you guys have seen my episodes on the Savoy label out of Newark, New Jersey, Wendell Marshall, Kenny Clark, and Hank Jones in the rhythm section for many great jazz records. Herman Lubinsky and Ozzy Cadena and the guys at Savoy, those were their go-to rhythm section. You're going to come in, you're going to play with a couple horns or piano. These guys are going to be the ones sitting there behind you. And then they had the great Joe Wilder, who I just mentioned with the Joe Newman earlier. And Wilder, boy, is such a beautiful player, muted, glorious ballad playing, blues drenched, just a spiritual player. I love Joe Wilder as a record as a leader on Savoy. That's highly desirable, fantastic. I love Wilder, but Wilder in this is an accompanist, and his echoing, haunting, muted trumpet that soars and aches and moans behind her vocals lends a depth and a consistent yearning, a passionate bleeding. I can't tell you how much Jo Wilder is why I love this record. And I love her voice, I love her phrasing, I love her style. She's a great singer. But I'm not going to play any tricks here. It's Jo Wilder who, time after time, his little emphasis and colors. And he's not playing and reinventing the wheel, giving you all kinds of dynamics and Dizzy Gillespie, Roy Eldridge fire. He's not throwing out, Lee Morgan aggression. He's not playing anything but maybe in the idiom of a guy like Sweets Edison. But he certainly has his own take on this. And I mean, song after song on this record is just what you want when you're listening to jazz, what most people are looking for. If I Love Again's fantastic. I Think of You With Every Breath I Take will just take you away. But We Could Make Such Beautiful Music Together was a song that killed me the other day. I played it probably 4 times. And again, Jo Wilder was just in rapture. It's absolutely desirable, delightful, wonderful. Pretty hard to find Old Savoy with an incredible lineup at a great label. Some of the best original material they were doing at that point is right there. It's fantastic stuff. And then we're going to talk about Dick Katz. And Dick Katz, fantastic pianist. This is on Atlantic, number 1314. Number 1314 probably makes it 1958, 59. 100 records on the 1200 sequence. And Dick's a great player. He's often backing up a lot of other players throughout that era. I don't remember who the guitar player on this is. Just fantastic. Joe Benjamin looks like, he's a bass player. Chuck Wayne is on the guitar. Jimmy Rainey's on some of it as well. And Jimmy Rainey's a fantastic player, and as is Chuck Wayne, I'm sorry. Look at the beautiful gloss of these old Atlantic originals. Just beautiful stuff. I mean, it's one of the records I haven't played a lot. And I played it the other day probably 3 times. Again, both sides. Fantastic, wonderful player. And again, the guitar stuff really kind of is what sucked me in again. Just fantastic stuff. Connie Kay's on the drums, Joe Benjamin on the bass. It looks like it's the guitar that changes. But I mean, Timonium is another song here that's just fantastic. Scrapping from the Apple's fantastic. Afternoon in Paris is wonderful. But Timonium is a song you want to check out. Dig that out, man, and hear it. Fantastic. Old green label, Atlantic stereo. Beautiful stuff. So that wraps up today's episode. Y'all be safe. Y'all have a great day. Dig the Ray Brown. Dig all these records I'm showing you. If you find them, don't pass them up. They're all fantastic listening. And again, Marlene Van Plank's a name you don't want to forget. Even some of her later Audio Fidelity records are fantastic. But like the early stuff is what you like. You always want to find the early stuff if you can find it. Y'all be blessed. Have a great day. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't. If you want to support this channel and what we're doing here, please go to my Patreon page in the description below. Pledge $5 a month just to help me out with the content. My wife just recently lost her job, and so money's going to be really tight right now. So say a prayer for us. Keep us in your thoughts. We need all the positive energy we can get to get through this. I don't want to lose this cafe. It's been a wonderful experience, and I love it. We'll talk to you all soon. Have a good day. Peace.